All right, so you sent me on this deep dive into 100 goblin shenanigans for this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I gotta say, like, my first thought was goblins, really. Like, are they really more than just, like, these walking XP pinatas? But this article, wow, it really kind of, like, changed my perspective on them.
Yeah.
What do you think about reframing goblins as, like, the class clowns of D&D?
I think it's about time that somebody gave these little green gremlins a little bit of credit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's very easy to fall into that trap of making them these one-dimensional threats.
Right.
But when you really think about it, their unconventional approach to everything is just begging for hilarious consequences.
Totally. And the article really emphasizes that this isn't about making goblins harmless. It's about adding layers to them, right?
Yeah.
So that they can be both a threat and a laugh riot all in one mischievous package.
Exactly. And you know, the author, Paul Bellow, he makes a really good point about, like, maintaining that element of surprise.
Okay.
That's still important, right?
Yeah.
So, like, a goblin catapulting another goblin into a party of adventurers,
Yeah.
hilarious, right?
Yeah.
But that projectile goblin can still pack a punch.
Right. It's like, surprise, you're covered in a goblin
Exactly.
who also happens to be wielding a rusty spoon as a weapon.
Precisely. It's about keeping your players on their toes.
Right.
Just when they think they have goblins figured out,
Yeah.
bam, you hit them with a goblin pyramid scheme to reach a beehive,
Okay.
which actually brings me to something kind of interesting about Bellow's approach here.
Okay. Let's unpack this. What's so interesting about beehives and pyramid schemes?
Well, it's not just about the laughs,
Okay.
although those are important.
Sure.
Bellow argues that these shenanigans can actually reveal goblin culture.
Oh, okay.
Right? It's not just random chaos.
Mm-hmm.
There's often a method to the madness.
Oh, that's a cool thought.
Yeah.
So it's like each shenanigan is like a little window into how goblins see the world,
Exactly.
how they solve problems.
Exactly. Like, take those silly sneak attacks, for instance.
Okay.
One of the examples is the Trojan rabbit goblins disguised as a giant bunny rabbit.
Okay. That's amazing.
Right. But it also tells us something about how goblins view stealth and deception.
Okay.
They're not exactly masters of subtlety.
More like masters of, look at me, I'm a totally inconspicuous giant rabbit.
Exactly. And that's where the humor lies.
Right.
Right? It's that wonderful blend of ambition and utter incompetence.
Speaking of which, can we talk about the pranks?
Yes.
Because I was dying when I read about the musical mayhem one,
Oh, yes.
swapping out coins with ones that play off keynotes. Genius.
It is.
But how would you actually use that in a game?
Well, it's all about those little details.
Okay.
They can really elevate a session.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine this. The party's bard finally gets their hands on some treasure,
Okay.
only to have their lute jingle out a polka tune.
Oh my God.
How would they react? How would the people around them react?
And imagine the chaos when they try to pay for a round of drinks at the tavern.
Oh, absolutely.
It becomes this whole event.
Right. And think about the storytelling possibilities there. Maybe the off-key coins were crafted by a mischievous fey creature.
Okay.
Or perhaps they're cursed.
Right.
Suddenly, what seemed like a simple prank has become a plot hook.
That's so clever. Okay. But the article doesn't just stop at individual shenanigans.
Right.
It goes full on Goblin Society
Yeah.
with the group activities.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the Goblin Olympics.
Yes.
Where they compete in events like stick throwing and who can scream the loudest.
Of course.
The Goblin Olympics had me laughing out loud.
Yeah.
But this idea of like the goblins competing in these ridiculous events, could this kind of shenanigan actually give players insights into goblin society?
Absolutely. It plays into their love of chaos,
Okay.
their tribal nature, and even their strange sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
It also gives you, as the DM, a chance to introduce some really interesting NPCs.
Right.
Who's the reigning champion of stick throwing?
Right.
What's their story?
It's like each of these shenanigans is a little world waiting to be explored.
Exactly. And that's what makes them so much fun to incorporate into D&D campaigns.
Right.
They can turn a mundane encounter into a side-splitting story that your players will be recounting for sessions to come.
For sure.
Speaking of stories, let's not forget about the goblin approach to magic, or rather, magic.
Right. It's less fireball and more fire. Oops, I accidentally dyed the rogue's hair green ball.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster, but with this like hefty dose of hilarity.
Right.
You know, the article talks about things like the Wand of Wonderful Mistakes,
Okay.
where the spells have a shall we say, increased chance of going sideways.
Oh, I love that. So instead of a fireball,
Yeah,
you get a fire. Oops, I accidentally turned the dungeon boss into a teapot spell.
exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting, mechanically speaking.
Okay.
Imagine you're the DM,
Mm-hmm.
and a player casts Fireball
Okay.
with the Wand of Wonderful Mistakes
Uh-huh.
instead of just rolling for damage.
Yeah.
You could roll on like a wild magic table
Mm-hmm.
for a completely random and probably hilarious side effect.
Okay, that's amazing. So it's not just about like describing the chaos, it's about building that unpredictability into the mechanics of the game.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It keeps the players guessing,
Right.
and it gives you, as the DM, so much creative freedom.
This is blowing my mind. Okay, I have to ask, what's one of the wildest magical mishaps from the book?
Oh, there's so many good ones.
Yeah.
I think my favorite has to be the polymorph potluck, where each dish has a random polymorph effect.
Oh my gosh.
Imagine like digging into a stew and turning into a badger.
Okay.
Or how about a nice flagon of ale that transforms you into a mimic?
Okay, now that's something I need to incorporate into my next campaign.
Yeah.
The looks on my players' faces would be priceless.
It would be amazing.
You know, prepping for this deep dive, what really struck me was the section on goblin improvisation.
Uh-huh.
It's like they get hit with this like bolt of chaotic inspiration and they just
Right.
like roll with it. Consequences be damned.
Yeah, and what I find so interesting about this section is that it really encourages DMs and players to let go of control a little bit.
Okay.
You set the stage,
Mm-hmm.
but then you let the goblins with all their unpredictable glory run wild.
It's like you're not just creating encounters, you're creating opportunities for glorious, ridiculous mayhem.
Exactly. And some of these improvisations are surprisingly ingenious,
Right?
like the goblin grappling hook,
Okay.
where they decide to chuck their stickiest member at a wall and see what happens.
It's brilliant in its absurdity. It's like their brains are wired for maximum chaos, but with a surprising dash of, dare I say, ingenuity sprinkled in.
Speaking of ingenuity, did you see the one about the living bridge?
Yeah, where they all link arms across a chasm and charge a toll.
Yes.
And the toll is, of course, a sandwich.
Naturally. What else would it be? It's those little details
Right.
that really sell the goblinness of it all.
I can just imagine my players standing at the edge of this chasm, looking at this like wobbly line of goblins demanding sandwiches. All right, guys, does anyone have a sandwich? Anyone?
It's a recipe for a hilarious encounter.
Totally.
Do they pay up? Do they try to barter? Do they try to build their own bridge? The possibilities are endless.
Or do they do what my players would probably do and try to ride one of the goblins like a surfboard across the chasm?
See, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's those moments of unpredictable player interaction
Yeah, right.
that make incorporating these shenanigans so rewarding.
Totally.
It's not just about adding humor.
Mm-hmm.
It's about creating unique gameplay opportunities.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the goblin disguise.
Oh, yes.
Because what's stealthier than a bunch of goblins stacked inside a trench coat pretending to be one very lumpy person?
Don't forget the multiple voices.
Oh, right.
The image of this lumpy trench coat trying to navigate a human market with all these different goblin voices arguing over what to steal next.
Right.
It's just too good.
Oh my gosh. I can already picture the DM describing the looks of suspicion from the NPCs as this person stumbles around.
Totally.
It's comedy gold.
And it highlights another key point.
Okay.
Description is everything.
Right,
The
yeah.
way you describe these shenanigans,
Mm-hmm.
the voices you use,
Yeah.
the little details that you add,
Right.
that's what brings them to life.
It's like painting a picture with words.
Yes.
Except the picture is a bunch of goblins trying to launch themselves over a wall with a giant slingshot made of bed sheets.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
You got me. I kind of love it. And it just goes to show with goblins, there is no limit to the ridiculousness.
Yeah.
They could turn anything into an adventure,
Mm.
from like trying to start their own goblin postal service
Yeah.
to hosting a goblin spa day in a muddy puddle.
And that's what makes them so much fun to incorporate into D&D campaigns.
Right.
They can turn a mundane encounter into a side-splitting story that your players will be recounting for sessions to come.
Exactly. They're like these little agents of chaos,
Yeah.
always ready to shake things up and keep everyone on their toes.
And speaking of shaking things up,
Okay.
have we discussed goblin siege tactics?
Oh, tell me this does not involve trebuchets and battering rams.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
Think more along the lines of goblin charades to
Okay.
convey battle plans,
Okay.
or goblin siege tactics
Mhm.
involving terrible poetry recitals, and interpretive dance routines designed to demoralize the enemy.
So basically, psychological warfare.
Yes.
Goblin style.
Precisely. They might not be great at traditional warfare,
Okay.
but give a goblin a loot and a captive audience, and they'll find a way to weaponize their unique brand of performance art.
I can already imagine the bard character in my group trying to get in on that action. It'd be like a battle of the bands, but with more off-key singing and lute strings snapping.
And that's another thing that the article emphasizes.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to let these goblin shenanigans inspire your players.
Okay.
Some of the best moments will come from those unexpected interactions and collaborations.
It's about creating a space where the ridiculous can thrive.
Yes.
Where a goblin trying to fly a hot air balloon made of animal bladders is not just plausible, it's expected.
And where those moments of goblin-induced chaos lead to new plot points, unexpected alliances, and stories that will be passed down through the annals of your gaming group's history.
Okay, I'm sold goblins. The unsung heroes of hilarious D&D campaigns. But let's get back to this article because there's one more important section we haven't touched on yet.
Okay.
And that's the author's tips for actually incorporating these shenanigans into a campaign. Okay, so we've got all these goblin shenanigans.
Yeah.
But how do we actually use them effectively?
Right.
Because it seems like it'd be really easy to go overboard.
Yeah, you'd be right. It is a delicate balance.
All right. Oh.
Bellow actually uses a really great analogy in the article.
Okay.
He compares it to seasoning a dish.
Yeah.
A little bit of goblin chaos can make your campaign tastier.
Yeah.
But too much, and you're going to overpower the whole thing.
And then your players are left with a bad taste in their mouths, metaphorically speaking.
Right.
Or maybe even literally if they're unlucky enough to encounter a goblin chef.
Exactly. It's about being strategic.
Okay.
The article talks about this idea of like reading the table.
Okay.
Knowing your players.
Right.
Some groups might love constant goblin antics.
Right.
While others might find it a little overwhelming.
Yeah, you don't want your players to like dread every encounter because they think it's just going to turn into like a slapstick routine.
Exactly. It's about finding those moments where a touch of goblin ridiculousness can really enhance the story.
So instead of a goblin ambush being like a serious threat, it's a chance for the goblins to show off their latest goblin guaranteed to scare the pants off you haunted house. Complete with like poorly drawn ghost costumes and buckets of slime they're calling ectoplasm.
See, now that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You've taken a classic encounter and given it this unique goblin-y twist.
And it gives the players a chance to kind of like role play differently too.
Absolutely.
Like, do they try to play along? Do they see through the ruse immediately? Maybe they even try to convince the goblins that their haunted house needs more cowbell.
And that's where the real magic happens, right?
Right.
When the players lean into the ridiculousness.
It becomes this like collaborative storytelling experience fueled by goblin chaos.
Yes.
I love it. Okay, so we've established that balance is key. Knowing your players is essential. What else does the article suggest?
Well, Bellow also really stresses the importance of DM creativity.
Okay.
He provides this fantastic framework with all these shenanigans. But he encourages DMs to get creative and come up with their own.
So it's not about just like lifting these ideas directly from the book.
Right.
It's about using them as inspiration to create something unique for your own campaign world.
Exactly. Think about the world you've built.
Right.
The characters within it. And what kind of ridiculous situations goblins could create within that context.
That's such an important point. So like if my players are, say, negotiating a trade agreement with a group of dwarves who are known for their love of finely crafted weapons, I shouldn't be surprised if they run into a group of goblins trying to sell genuine dwarf-made weapon enhancements.
Right.
Which of course turn out to be nothing more than like bits of colorful string and shiny pebbles glued together.
Precisely. You've taken a specific scenario within your campaign.
Yeah.
And you've injected it with this healthy dose of goblin ingenuity.
Yes.
Or, well, goblin attempts at ingenuity.
Exactly. And the beauty of it is, even if a goblin shenanigan doesn't go exactly as planned, that's okay.
Yeah.
In fact, those unexpected turns of events often make for the most memorable stories.
Absolutely. Embrace the chaos.
Yes.
Roll with the punches.
Okay.
And remember, when it comes to goblins,
yeah,
there's no such thing as a failed plan.
Right.
Just an opportunity for something even more ridiculous to occur.
I'm so glad we did a deep dive on this.
Me too.
I'm looking at goblins in a whole new light.
That's awesome.
Any final words of goblin wisdom for our listeners before we wrap up?
I would say if you're looking to inject some humor and some unpredictable fun into your D&D games, look no further than the humble goblin.
They're great.
They might be small, they might be green, and they might be a little too fond of things that explode.
Right.
But they are a gold mine of comedic potential just waiting for you to tap into it.
So true. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Okay.
We hope you've enjoyed this chaotically delightful exploration of D&D's most mischievous creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Until next time, happy gaming.